나요? 아, 이렇게 안 떨어지는구나.
이거 쓸 수 없는 건가요?
B급 상이라 해야지. 이리 와봐.
자, 한번 해보겠습니다.
우와.
이거 잡아봐요. 잡고 이리 가봐.
우와, 기분 좋아지는 영상.
야, 저리 가.
네. 안 끊어지게.
여기다 이렇게 쫙 피워봐. 옳지. 그렇게 하고 가만. 이제 이렇게 쓰는 거야. 이렇게 쓸어봐. 이게 건조하는 거야.
오, 완전 진짜 찐 건조네요.
다음 단계는 뭘까요?
도침하는 거.
도침.
가봅시다. 도침으로.
이리 가봐.
저랑 준호가.
둘이 먼저 가봐. 일어나요?
전 계속 해.
시작.
그렇지, 그렇게. 놓고. 그럼 하나는, 이게 지금 종이가 여기 반지래라고 하니까, 이렇게 잡고, 앵긴 거. 오늘 수고들 했고,
네.
그래서 내가 이 종이를 한 장씩 선물로.
감사합니다. 비싼 거잖아요.
are the cherry on top, the apple of my eye. You have me at hello, and I'll never say goodbye. You're a diamond in the rough, a needle in the hay, the moon in my night, the sun in my day. And I don't know why I got so lucky.
바로 먹어볼까?
그래, 잘 먹겠습니다.
잘 먹겠습니다.
진짜
맛있겠다.
야, 맛이 진짜 없을 수가 없어.
맛이 없을 수가 없어.
Ooh, lucky. Ooh, you are the cream of the crop.
자, 먹어볼게.
나도 먹어볼게.
일단 콩나물 양부터 합격이야.
야, 양념장부터 그냥 비교할 수 없어.
근본이야, 근본.
나 이거 너무 궁금하다. 떡하면 맛있지?
너무 맛있는데?
야, 떡하면 너무 미친 거 아니야?
야, 너무 맛있어. 맞아.
야, 이 파전도 먹어봐야겠다. 피자인데 전이 아니야.
잘 먹겠습니다.
형.
너무 맛있네. 야, 너무 맛있어.
진짜 너무 잘 먹었다.
고트야, 고트.
그러니까 근본인 이유가 있어.
이 본고장인 이유가 있다니까.
맞아.
잘 먹었습니다.
진짜 배부르다.
너무 배부르다.
바로 산책하러 가자.
야, 진짜 너무 예쁘다.
조명이 너무 예쁜데?
야, 완전 낭만 있는.
그러니까 우리가 지금
진짜 불평 하나도 없을걸?
우리만 너무 재밌는 걸 하고 있어.
아, 여기가 도서관이네.
저는 제가 좀 여행하면서 느꼈던 건데 항상 저희가 여행을 하면은 뭔가 진짜 그 전통적인 장소에 가서 여행하는 거를 한 번도 못 해봤는데 전주가 딱 그런 곳인 것 같아가지고 뭔가 외국 분들이 너무 좋아하실 것 같더라고요.
젊은 사람들이 여기 놀러 와도 엄청 재밌게 놀겠구나라는 생각이 들었고 되게 드리밍 여러분이나 아니면 세계 각지에 계신 팬분들께 정말 추천드리고 싶은 그런 도시 중 하나입니다.
요새는 뭔가 어디 놀러 가도 너무 다 뻔하고 한데
맞아요.
여기는 전통적인데 트렌디해요.
진짜 뭔지 알죠?
뭔 말인지 알 것 같지? 전 세계 많은 분들과 그리고 안 와보신 분들도 꼭 와서 즐기셨으면 좋겠습니다.
꼭 놀러 오세요.
놀러 오세요.
전주로
놀러 오세요.
트위스타님
안녕.
안녕.
잘 지내. 빠빠.
도시는 세계와 연결되어 문화를 창조했고 새로운 것을 받아들였다.
함께여서 우리는 더 자유롭고 더 멀리 갈 수 있어.
닫힌 문이 아니라 열린 질문으로
나에게 에이펙은
자유,
융합,
국제성,
다양성, 포용,
개발.
신라의 정신이 에이펙 2025로 이어집니다.
Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. South Korea has reached a deal with the United States to release hundreds of workers detained during a massive immigration raid on a Hyundai facility in Georgia. They will depart on a charter flight as early as Wednesday. The South Korean government and the ruling party have agreed to dismantle the country's prosecution service and strip the finance ministry of its power to prepare budgets. Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has announced that he will resign. This follows growing calls from within his party to take responsibility for her historic defeat in July's parliamentary election. We begin this morning with updates on the immigration raid on a South Korean factory in the U.S. state of Georgia. South Korea has concluded talks with the United States for the release of more than 300 Korean workers detained last week. A presidential official says a charter flight will be sent to bring them home once U.S. administrative procedures are complete. Our Park Hyubin starts us off.
U.S. President Donald Trump said Sunday local time that he would look into the immigration raid on a Hyundai plant in Georgia, while emphasizing that ties with South Korea are great.
We have a great relationship with South Korea. Really good relationship.
Trump was speaking after reports that the mass detention of South Korean workers by U.S. immigration authorities is entering a resolution phase. According to the presidential office on Sunday, negotiations for the release of more than 300 detained South Korean workers have been concluded. But it added that U.S. administrative procedures remain in place.
Negotiations for the release of our detained workers have been concluded. Only administrative procedures remain, and once those are finalized, a chartered flight will depart to bring our people home.
The earliest option under review is for the workers to return on a chartered flight this Wednesday, U.S. time. To finalize the process, Foreign Minister Cho Hyun is leaving for the U.S. on Monday. He is expected to meet U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio to discuss the pending procedures as well as preventive measures to avoid a similar situation occurring. The South Korean government also pledged to establish fundamental safeguards, such as creating new visa categories for short-term dispatches and consultation with Washington. Officials stressed that resolving visa issues is essential, especially as South Korea has promised active investment in the U.S. during trade negotiations.
Even if this case is resolved quickly, the government and ruling party will do our utmost to establish fundamental measures to ensure that similar incidents do not recur.
Meanwhile, Washington has warned of tougher enforcement of immigration rules. Tom Homan, the White House border security chief under the Trump administration, told CNN that more large-scale raids and arrests should be expected at work sites, including those run by foreign companies like Hyundai and LG Energy Solution. Last Friday, U.S. immigration authorities said a total of 475 individuals, including around 300 Koreans, were arrested in the ICE raid. U.S. officials said they were engaged in unauthorized work, with some on temporary or tourist visas that prohibit employment. The South Korean workers are currently being held at the ICE detention center in Folkestone, Georgia. The facility, which has a maximum capacity of 1,100, has long faced criticism for overcrowding, sanitation, and safety issues. Park Hyubin, Arirang News.
So last week's raid at a Hyundai plant in Georgia was one of the largest immigration raids in recent U.S. history. For more on this, we're joined by Professor Choi Hyun-jin, professor at the Department of Political Science at Kyunghee University. Professor Choi, thanks for joining us this morning.
Morning, thank you for having me.
So U.S. officials say this was a months-long federal immigration operation and that they've been collecting documents and developing evidence for months. What's really behind this raid?
I think this case has both legal and political sides. Officially, U.S. authorities have announced that some of the Korean engineers worked at their LG battery and also Hyundai plant with a proper visa. For example, some entered the United States with the ESTA or short-term business visa like B1, but worked on construction sites, which is not allowed under the current U.S. immigration law. However, in the past, U.S. officials have often tolerated this kind of a practice, especially during early stage of the huge investment. So the timing and the scale of this raid feels very unusual. And this happened in Georgia, which is one of the key swing states in American domestic politics. And also the second term of Donald Trump has strongly focused on the enforcement of the illegal immigration. So this raid seems to send a clear political message. So even big foreign investors must follow every American immigration law, and it's part of the American first policy under the new Trump administration. So of course, some opposition lawmakers in South Korea argue that this might be some retaliation measure for the recent special prosecutor's investigation of the Osan air base, which is jointly operated by South Korean and American forces. But we should not, we should be cautious because there is no clear evidence that links these two different events, and premature speculation could harm our diplomacy. So what is clear is now over 300 Korean engineers and workers are detained, some even in chains, and the video was made public, and this created great shock in Korea. And Korean government responded very quickly, and they successfully negotiated with the American government to release our workers as soon as possible. But going forward, both governments must work together to improve and prepare the visa system for our huge investment project.
Right. And industry insiders in Korea say that because of the nature of construction work, companies have often relied on the ESTA visa waiver system or on short-term visas like the B1, like you just mentioned. The latest rate is now expected to, sort of change this, right?
Yes, so this case really shows that the limits of how foreign companies operate in the United States, especially in big industrial projects. So in this kind of project, companies often need to send very skilled workers and engineers to the United States for short-term jobs, like setting up equipment or stabilizing production lines. But here is the problem. The proper work visa, like H-1B or H-2B, they take 2 or 3 months to process, and also they are very limited in number. For this region, for Korean companies investing billions of dollars in the United States, obtaining H-1 visa is not really realistic. So many of them used these short-term options like ESTA or business visa in the past. So until now, this practice has often been tolerated by American authorities, but under President Trump's second term, U.S. immigration is becoming much stricter. So I think this is more a political issue because there is a growing America first mood, and also any foreign worker, even temporarily, can be seen as taking a job from America. So unless there is a clear visa pathway for this skilled worker, we may see some more disruptions in the near future.
Right, and the latest raid was a shock to many because South Korea is considered a key U.S. ally, and it actually comes less than 2 weeks after President Lee Jae-myung held a summit with Donald Trump in Washington, D.C., and after Korean companies, including Hyundai, actually agreed to invest tens of billions of dollars in the United States. How do you think the latest immigration raid will impact bilateral relations?
That's true. The timing of this immigration raid is very unusual and also very sensitive. It happened just a few days after President Lee Jae-myung met with Donald Trump in Washington, D.C., and also not long after Korean government announced a new round of huge investment in the United States. And that's why many Korean people are confused and even upset to see this kind of event. And yes, the United States has a right to enforce the law, but when over 300 Korean workers are suddenly detained, even in chains, and without any notice or prior consultation with the Korean government, that crossed the line, and it's not what we can expect from a trustworthy ally like the United States. And this sends a troubling message to Korean business. So even if you invest billions of dollars in the United States and create American jobs, your workers may still be treated rather unfairly. So looking ahead, I don't think this incident will destroy the Korea-U.S. Diplomatic relation or alliance, but we have to acknowledge that this has created a crack in mutual trust. So to fix this problem, both governments need to work seriously, especially about a realistic and also legal visa system between the two countries.
Right, absolutely. A lot of issues still left to resolve right there. All right, Professor Choi, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for your insight. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
On the local front, at a high-level meeting between the ruling party, government, and presidential office, a government reorganization plan was finalized, which includes the dismantling of the prosecutor's office. They aim to pass it at the National Assembly's plenary session this month. Our political correspondent Shin-Young reports.
The centerpiece of the Lee Jae-myung administration's government reorganization plan is prosecution reform. The plan was announced Sunday following a high-level meeting between the ruling Democratic Party, government, and presidential office. Under the plan, the prosecutor's office will be dismantled and replaced by two new agencies, one under the Justice Ministry handling indictments and another under the Interior Ministry handling investigations.
Prosecution reform is one of the president's key pledges. There have been ongoing concerns that the prosecution has abused its unchecked power and undermined fairness, with selective investigations and arbitrary indictments deepening public distrust.
The changes will take effect 1 year after the plan is approved by the National Assembly and announced to the public, with a task force under the Prime Minister's office set up to work out the details of prosecution reform. Reorganization will also affect the Finance Ministry, which will continue handling taxation, economic policy, and treasury matters, but budget planning will be transferred to a new agency under the Prime Minister's supervision. The Environment Ministry will be expanded to take over energy policy responsibilities that are currently handled by the Industry Ministry. A new Deputy Prime Minister for Science and Technology will be created to oversee AI, and the Deputy Prime Minister for Social Affairs position held by the Education Minister will be abolished.
This government reorganization is a first step to carry out key public priorities and support the new administration's goals. It seeks to streamline ministry functions and prepare for complex challenges, such as the climate crisis and the AI transformation.
Meanwhile, during Sunday's high-level meeting, measures on labor safety and natural disasters were also discussed. The DP called for more support for small businesses and penalties for companies that have a poor record when it comes to accidents.
Workplaces with repeated accidents should face strict penalties, while those that prevent accidents should be rewarded.
The government said it'll strengthen support for vulnerable workers while enforcing effective sanctions. For natural disasters, they plan to work on preventive measures with extra funding. Shin-Young, Arirang News.
Over in Japan, the country's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba announced his resignation on Sunday, less than a year after taking office. The announcement comes amid mounting pressure from within its own Liberal Democratic Party, after the party suffered major defeat in July's upper house election. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has announced his resignation less than a year after taking office.
I have decided to resign as the Liberal Democratic Party president.
Ishiba made the announcement at a Sunday evening news conference, bowing to mounting pressure from within his own Liberal Democratic Party. The ruling party has been in turmoil since suffering a major defeat in July's upper house election. Ishiba had resisted calls to step down, insisting he could hold the government together. He pointed to progress in tariff talks with the United States, measures to stabilize rice prices, and a summit with South Korean President Lee Jae-myung as signs of recovery. However, his approval ratings never fully recovered, and discontent only grew louder from within the LDP. Party lawmakers and regional leaders were set to vote Monday on whether to hold an early leadership election. With nearly half already backing the move, Ishiba decided to step aside rather than face a split vote. His resignation triggers the race to choose the next LDP president, a post that almost always means taking on the role of prime minister. Early polls show two frontrunners, Sanae Taikaichi, a staunch conservative, and Shinjiro Koizumi, the agriculture minister and son of former prime minister Junichiro Koizumi. During Ishiba's time as prime minister, his government struggled with surging prices, falling real wages, and a rice market crisis that critics say exposed deep weakness within his cabinet. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
8 members of OPEC Plus, including Russia, on Sunday agreed to raise oil production output by 137,000 barrels per day starting next month. Energy ministers from Saudi Arabia, Russia, Iraq, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Kazakhstan, Algeria, and Oman reached a decision during a virtual meeting, reaffirming their commitment to stabilizing the market based on sound oil market conditions and a stable global economic outlook. The decision marks the 7th consecutive month of output hikes since the group shifted to a production increase in April. The countries had previously implemented voluntary production cuts in 2023 outside the APEC Plus framework to counter price declines fueled by weak Chinese demand and the global push for electric vehicles. The recent animated movie, K-pop Demon Hunters, has been sweeping the hearts of many viewers. But how can those with visual impairments also enjoy the movie? Our An Sung-jin tells us how the efforts of transitioning non-verbal elements of content to verbal components can help.
각과 국보 차림의 진우가 굳은 얼굴로 서 있다. 호랑이가 진우의 팔에 얼굴을 비빈다.
This is a scene from the renowned Netflix film K-pop Demon Hunters. The Korean Community Media Foundation provided a screening of this popular movie with attached audio descriptions.
One of our major goals is to create no discrimination between disabled and non-disabled audiences in media. So we work on screening accessible movies.
For most of us, watching a movie means sitting back and soaking in the visuals. But we might be taking this for granted. Veteran Seo Soo-yeon redefines how stories are told and experienced. She started the Korea Content Accessibility Research Center, and for 23 years, she's been working on expressing nonverbal elements of content into spoken aspects.
To be honest, this was all very unfamiliar to me because no one had done it before. I had never thought that people with visual impairments couldn't watch TV. But I realized there are movements, actions, and nuances that they miss entirely.
Her work involves adding descriptions of subtle expressions and action sequences in between the spoken lines, creating a fuller cinematic experience for the visually impaired.
시장이 빈 그릇에서 가게 사장에게로 공격한다. 사장을 꼬챙이에 얼음을 끼우고 있다.
For Seo, effective audio descriptions aren't about matching visuals word for word, but rather producing context, clarity, and flow. But what she says, what's often more important yet neglected, is the language used that creates further division.
There shouldn't be hard lines drawn between people with and without disabilities, because anyone can become visually impaired. So we often frame accessibility as something only for people with disabilities, but it really starts with understanding others.
The push for accessible content is gaining ground, but there's still a long way to go. With efforts from people like Seo, moments that can be lost in darkness can enhance a powerful scene for everyone. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Choi Ji-hee, and this is The World Now. Russia has launched its largest aerial assault on Ukraine, hitting the main government building in Kyiv for the first time. On Sunday, Russia launched over 800 drones and 13 missiles, targeting Kyiv and several other regions across Ukraine. Although Ukraine intercepted most of the incoming attacks, the strikes resulted in the deaths of at least 3 people in Kyiv, including a mother and her infant. The office of Ukraine's Cabinet of Ministers also sustained damage. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy condemned the assault as a ruthless, deliberate crime. He said the drone and missile barrage caused widespread damage throughout the north, south, and east of the country, including the cities of Zaporizhia and Odessa. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump announced that the U.S. is prepared to implement a second stage of sanctions against Russia, particularly targeting buyers of Russian oil and gas. Moving over to Africa, Boko Haram militants killed more than 60 people, including civilians and soldiers in northeastern Nigeria over the weekend. Authorities confirmed on Saturday that at least 63 people were killed by the jihadist group's attack on the village of Darul Jamal in Borno State. The region had recently been repopulated by residents from a camp for internally displaced persons. Borno State Governor Babagana Zulum, visiting the attacked community late Saturday night, said this community was resettled some months ago and they went about their normal business. Militants destroyed more than 20 houses and 10 buses during the raid. While the Nigerian Air Force said it killed 30 militants in strikes in response, Governor Zulum said the numerical strength was not enough to contain the situation and pledged to bolster security. In Thailand, Anutin Charnvirakul officially became the country's prime minister on Sunday, following royal endorsement by King Maha Vajiralongkorn. After securing 311 parliamentary votes on Friday, Anutin pledged to turn the country back into the land of smiles. He has also agreed to dissolve parliament and call an election within 4 months. Anutin previously served as Deputy Prime Minister, Interior Minister, and Health Minister, and is best known for his role in decriminalizing cannabis in 2022. He is Thailand's third Prime Minister in just 2 years, following the removal of Paetongtarn Shinawatra by court order last month for ethics violations related to a leaked phone call with Cambodia's former leader. In the Vatican, a teenage boy who died of leukemia in 2006, aged 15, has become the first millennial saint of the Catholic Church as Pope Leo XIV canonized the tech prodigy during a mass in St. Peter's Square on Sunday. Some 70,000 to 80,000 people attended the ceremony. Carlo Acutis, a British-born Italian boy with the nickname God's Influencer, became renowned for creating a multilingual website that cataloged Eucharistic miracles recognized by the Church, merging deep faith with digital innovation. An Italian mountaineering enthusiast who served the poor and sick and died in 1925 was also canonized in the pontiff's first sainthood event.
An early autumn breeze in the mornings and evenings is being welcomed by many of us, but the daytime heat will still linger across much of the country. But the main event today is rain in the southern regions with heavy downpours. Rain that's falling in Jeju this morning will spread to Jeollado, then to the Gyeongsangdo provinces, lasting through tomorrow night. Meanwhile, the southern coast in Jeju will see showers continuing into Wednesday. And until then, Jeju Island and Jeollanam-do provinces might get up to 100 millimeters of downpours, while the southern coast of Gyeongsang-Namdo province could get up to 80 millimeters. Meanwhile, the central regions will stay mostly cloudy today with a high of 29 degrees here in the capital. Daegu, Gwangju will also get up to 29 degrees, but Jeju Island still very warm at 32 degrees. Afternoon heat will still hovers above 30 degrees Celsius this week in most parts, while lows will stay in the low 20s. So please dress accordingly and take care.
Now that's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.
We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Monday, September 8th here in Seoul. I'm Lee Soo-jin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Park Ki-eun.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Also, Yoon Se-young's with us.
Good morning, everyone.
And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So it's Monday, which means some of us are starting our work week while others are starting their school week. And there's one item that we can't imagine going without as we head to either our workplace or school, our smartphones. And this is true for adults and students alike. But recently, South Korea passed a bill banning the use of mobile phones and smart devices at schools, set to take effect from the next school year in March 2026. So for today's discussion, we'll be examining this new regulation and what it means for students, parents, and educators. So to start our discussion for today, Kyun, how many hours a day do you typically spend on your phone?
That's a very good question. I never really counted exactly how many hours I spent on my phone on a daily basis, but my smartphone, being very smart, was actually keeping track of it the whole time. So it turns out that my average daily smartphone usage is almost 4 hours. Which is like a quarter of the time when I'm awake during the day. It showed me which applications I use the most. Number one being YouTube, second being my navigation, and third being my Kakao Messenger app. Since I drive almost every day and I turn on my navigation because I'm not really good with the directions, I think that accounted for the long hours I spent on my phone. I'm sure many of you, including both of you, spent a lot of time on streaming platforms and also social media, and of course Messenger apps. And apparently many health professionals recommend keeping recreational screen time, like social media, gaming, etc., to under 2 hours a day, while others say 2 to 4 hours of purposeful smartphone use that includes learning and productive tasks is appropriate. So I guess I'm on the appropriate end.
You're doing very well.
Yeah.
I think you are, considering if you're counting also using navigation, it's really not that bad.
And right now, I don't have a smartphone with me. I'm actually charging it outside, and I was feeling a little anxious, but I'm okay.
What about you, Sam?
Well, honestly, I use my smartphones quite a lot, and I hate to say this, but sometimes I feel that I'm pretty dependent on it. For one thing, I use it to take pictures or videos of my kids, and I also use it for messaging, not just to stay in touch with my family or friends, but so much of my work are connected to it, so I need to check it all the time, sometimes even on weekends. And on top of that, I use it for social media, YouTube, of course, and navigation. And I also do online grocery shopping on my phone. So it's really become inseparable from my daily life. But the tricky part is I don't want my kids to grow up too used to seeing smartphones all the time. So I try to set an example by cutting back on my own usage. But it's really hard, so that's the dilemma I face.
I feel like not to give ourselves an excuse, not to make excuses. So much of our work is like, and also like you said, grocery shopping is a necessity.
Yes.
It's really to, yeah.
Then use your laptop.
I know.
That's a good point.
Mommy has a good excuse.
So starting next year, smartphones will be completely banned in schools, and naturally, this has sparked a lot of conversation and debate among students, parents, and educators alike. But before we dive into all of that, can you explain exactly what this new regulation entails, Kyun?
Sure thing. So the new law of banning use of smartphones in schools, otherwise called Elementary and Secondary Education Act, was recently passed in the National Assembly plenary session. So starting from the first semester of next year, which is March, elementary, middle, and high school students will be prohibited from using smartphones and other smart devices during class. However, exceptions are allowed for students who use them as assistive devices due to disabilities or special education needs, or in response to emergency situations. So the types of smart devices restricted for use and possession will be determined by school rules. Plus, the head of the school also needs to ensure that education on proper use of smart devices is incorporated into the school curriculum in accordance with the Education Basic Act.
So smartphones have become such an essential part of our lives that it's hard to imagine going through a day without them, whether it's for work, socializing, or just passing the time. But I'm guessing most teachers already discourage their students from using their phones during class. So how is this new regulation different from what was happening before, Sale?
That's a really good point. In fact, teachers have always tried to discourage their students from using smartphones during the class, but it was not applied to all schools or all classes because until now, schools have been regulating smartphone use on their own. According to a survey by the Gyeonggi Institute of Education, 43% of elementary, middle, and high schools restricted smartphone use through school rules, but more than 30% relied on students to manage their own usage. And looking closer, 32% left it entirely up to students' self-control, while 10% allowed each class to decide for themselves. But with the new decision, a more systematic legal guidelines has been introduced now. And also under the revised law, schools can now restrict the use or even possession of smartphones or other smart devices on campus to protect students' right to learn and teachers' right to teach instead of just relying on autonomy.
But what's the reasoning behind this new school smartphone ban? Why do lawmakers or educators feel a need to implement it through a nationwide bill rather than just leaving it up to individual schools to decide their own policies like they did before?
I mean, to start off with, numerous studies have found that early smartphone use leads to various side effects such as reduced attention span, lack of sleep, and even cyberbullying. And according to the Ministry of Gender, Equality and Family, as many as 210,000 adolescents are reported to be experiencing difficulties in daily life due to excessive use of smartphones and the internet. So this gave lawmakers and educators enough reason to raise it to a nationwide bill. Furthermore, lawmaker Cho Jong-hun of the People Power Party, who actually proposed the amendment, explained that the law is a promise to protect the most precious things, which are conversations with friends, small jokes and laughter, and children's concentration and rest time in the classroom. And he added that it's not about taking away smartphones and the human rights, etc., but about returning children's time and lives as students.
That's really important. What was your experience like in school with smartphone devices?
Oh, let's not go there. Back in my day, we didn't have smartphones to begin with. We had these little brick phones, the 2G phones, which didn't have many functions at all. So it was just for texting or calling. So what was actually trending back then was MP3 players.
Oh, I remember this.
Yes, I used to sneak them into classrooms and put it up my sleeve, the earphones, and pretend I'm leaning on the side and just listen to music throughout the class. So that was my main source of distraction, not so much the smartphones back in the day when I was young.
If these regulations in place, maybe you can get back and interact with other students as well.
Exactly, yep.
Are there any other reasons for the regulations, Hae-young?
Well, this bill is not only about protecting students, but also about protecting teachers. A survey found that about 66% of teachers said they had experienced class disruptions due to students' use of smartphone during the class. And in a recent statement, the Teachers Association in Ulsan explained that the new law provides an institutional safeguard against classroom disruptions, such as unauthorized recordings or photos, as well as other behaviors that undermine teachers' authority. So in the end, the law aims to protect both teachers and students while hopefully creating a more respectful and focused classroom environment.
Right, so concerns about the overuse of smartphones, especially among students, are obviously very valid. But at the same time, some people argue that banning them outright might be too restrictive since phones can also be used for learning, communication, and even safety. And that's why this decision hasn't been completely welcomed by everyone. So Kyun, how are young people then reacting to this ban?
So banning the use of smartphones in schools could be taking away the freedom and rights of students and further encourage excessive human rights violation in schools from teachers and educators. But one thing for sure is that students go to school to learn and to be educated. And if the use of smartphones in classrooms actually distracts and hinders their learning, then I think using them should be restricted to a certain extent. And like I said, I remember back in my school days, everyone was allowed to have their smartphones in the classroom. And there were, I guess, like half of the students would actually play with them and get confiscated from the teachers. The other half, the good students, they weren't distracted by the smartphones. They would have them in their pockets, put it on silent mode, and it didn't hinder their learning at all. So the teachers had no problem with the good students. So I'm not trying to separate bad from good students, but I think if the students can actually control their actions and refrain from actually playing with them, I mean, give them the freedom and the leniency. But then if that doesn't work, that's when rules need to be implemented by, I guess, just banning it completely. So I think it's a double-edged sword.
Right. I guess this is where this new regulation comes in. And of course, Hae, you're a parent, so I'm sure this, discussion hits close to home. So what are young parents around you saying about this?
Well, as I mentioned in the opening, I often worry about my kids being drawn into the world of smartphone too quickly and growing overly dependent on them. And my children are only 5 and 2 years old, but they already know how to unlock simple passwords.
Wow, a 2-year-old.
Yes, and how to turn on cameras or start YouTube by themselves. And sometimes it's quite frightening to see how instinctively they know how to manage these smart devices at such a young age. So I can only imagine that once they get older, it will become even harder for me as a parent to set limits. So for that reason, I personally welcome this regulation. I feel it's meaningful that at least in schools now, there will be a stronger legally backed framework that helps protect children's right to learn, and it will help them focus more during the class. And among the parents I know, most of them share the same view, similar view, I believe. And we feel that true freedom is not about being able to use smartphones whenever you want, but it's about being able to focus and enjoy playing with friends and live your school life fully without feeling the constant pull to the screen.
Have you ever thought about when you want to give your kids smartphones?
When they go to elementary school, there's a thing called the kids phone, not smartphone. There's no internet access, but you can still contact your parents, especially in an emergency situation. So yeah, I think it's a pretty good idea.
So I guess that could be like an alternative for people who want options after this ban is in place. But of course, this kind of regulation isn't just happening in Korea. So how are other countries handling smartphone use in schools, Hyun?
It's happening all around the world. France has completely banned the use of smartphones to elementary and middle school students nationwide since 2018. The Netherlands, Italy, Spain, and China also have laws restricting or prohibiting smartphone use in schools, and the list goes on. And according to UNESCO, as of last year, smartphone ban policies were in effect in 79 countries.
That's a lot.
It's a lot of countries.
Do you know of any examples maybe of countries that have even stricter rules in Korea, maybe?
Well, another noteworthy example comes from Toyoake City in Japan, where a proposed ordinance suggests limiting smartphone use to 2 hours per day for all residents. And this initiative aims to address concerns over excessive screen time affecting sleep, mental health, and social interactions as well. And the proposal includes recommendations for curfews. Children aged 6 to 12 should avoid screen use after 9 p.m. and middle school students and above after 10 p.m. And that includes adults as well. And while the ordinance is non-binding, of course, and carries no penalties, it has sparked debate among residents, with some supporting these rules, but others raising concerns about practicality and freedom.
Right. I guess students in Korea won't complain about these bans once they hear about this.
10 p.m.
So excessive smartphone use, especially among young people, is an issue seen across the globe. So it's not really surprising that schools in many countries are implementing regulations to manage students' smartphone usage. And to get a better sense of how this is being handled internationally, we're going to hear from someone from a different country about his experience with smartphone rules in schools. And that conversation will take place right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search our channel Arirang News. Click Community and leave a comment down below. Make a new type of news with us.
We're joined today by Fabio, a Gen Z from Spain. Hi, Fabio. Thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Hi there, good morning. Nice to see you all.
So do schools in Spain also have rules about smartphone use?
Yes, right now most regions and also the Ministry of Education are aligning with the concerns of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which means that banning this type of devices in school is said to improve concentration and also avoid problems like cyberbullying, as you have mentioned. Right now, there is no specific ban taking place, but it is true that for the most part, it is not allowed in educational centers. My father, for example, is a principal of a public institution, a public educational center in Spain. So what I have learned so far is that every single center has their own rules. But for the most part, children that are under 12 are not allowed to carry smartphones unless extremely necessary. And for high schools, from personal experience, I do think that most students usually carry the devices, but if they're not confiscated, they're usually not allowed during class or recess.
Okay, Fabio, so how are people in your country generally viewing smartphone regulations, and what kinds of opinions or debates have you seen arise surrounding this issue?
Well, there's a lot of reservations when it comes to the use of new technologies, a lot of concerns. I think a ban, for example, if you're thinking about it positively, you can provide the kind of like technological detox to students. They can, you're allowing them to live in the moment. But at the same time, I feel like there's also an irrational fear from our generation towards newer generations, because we think that because of our incompetence with new technologies, they might also behave the same way. I do think that we tend to imagine these kids just using TikTok all the time instead of taking notes with the new type of tools. That is kind of the truth. When I was in high school, I used to sneakily use Instagram as a distraction instead of actually, using assisting technology. But at the same time, if the educational center does not provide the possibility of experimenting or discovering that type of assisting technology, it might be quite limiting. So I do think that regulations and having those kind of boundaries are definitely necessary to avoid a lot of problems. But at the same time, we shouldn't only have a reductive type of perspective when it comes to these new technologies.
I see. Then, in your opinion, what would be a wise or effective way to regulate smartphones?
Well, in case we try to avoid a whole ban that might be quite limiting, I do think that implementing it in ways that are definitely, I guess, productive would be the nice way. But that also depends on the competence of the educational center. For example, a lot of schools in Spain are providing tablets or computers that have limited internet access, but are also up to date with newer technologies. So that could be a perfect system. Or, for example, also allowing students to use smartphones in class for a very specific assignment or a very specific task, but always making sure that every single student is on the same page and using it for a very productive type of purpose. But if you're not allowing that opportunity and you're having students have their smartphone in class, I guess it's counterproductive, because they don't really have the possibility of using it or learning how to use it, and it's going to only become a distraction. So I guess it really depends on whether the center is prepared, has the infrastructure, the devices, or the knowledge for it. If they don't really have that, I do think that setting some boundaries is important, but completely banning it from the whole country and all of the institutions might be a little bit problematic or limiting.
Like you said, I think finding a middle ground will be key. Thank you so much for sharing your insight with us today.
No problem. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So we just heard from a young person from Spain about how smartphones are regulated in their schools. It's really interesting to see how both their similarities and differences compared to Korea. And while regulating smartphones in schools can have clear benefits like reducing distractions, improving focus in class, and even protecting students from online risks, there are also concerns about whether such rules might be too restrictive. So based on what we've discussed today, Taeyong, in your opinion, is turning to legal ban really the right solution? Should something like this be handled through law or left to students' parents and students to manage on their own?
Well, I think a legal framework is necessary. Schools, parents, and students can try to manage smartphone usage on their own, but voluntary measures are not enough. I hate to say this, but it's true. And a nationwide law ensures consistency, so every child gets the same level of protection no matter their school or family situation. And as a parent, knowing there's a clear legal basis helps reinforce healthy habits at home and ensures children's focus and time at schools are respected. And it's not about taking away freedom, I believe, but also creating a structured environment where kids can develop attention, social skills, and healthy routines.
I think these are really good points. What are your thoughts on this, Kyiv?
It will take some time to see any kind of results when this kind of bill is implemented. But I think this move kind of seems to show the law leaning more towards the school and the teachers over students, because by implementing the law, teachers will have greater control of the class and their students. However, we have seen in recent times students and their parents somewhat showing more authority and power than teachers as they were victims of abuse, harassment, and even threats. And this tilted relationship went viral and led to many teachers actually leaving their jobs or not even wanting to pursue teaching as a career at all. And even a few teachers, unfortunately, taking away their own lives from emotional distress from students and the parents of those students. So I think this law, if it helps the school education system and in turn help the children and students in turn in the long run, I think it could be very beneficial, because even as adults, we can't really control not using smartphones. So we have to set an example first. And if we cannot do that, I mean, we should follow rules as well. But I think that's another issue to talk about later.
I agree. So to wrap up our discussion today, Kyiv, then what do you think is the best way to regulate smartphone use in schools without going too far or restricting students unnecessarily?
You know, I think students should learn to obey rules as students. And if the use of smartphones is prohibited during class, then simply following can solve the issue very easily. But everything is easier said than done. Maybe perhaps if the teachers show an example, like I just mentioned, first by not using smartphones at all in classrooms, I think students can look at the teachers and think, oh, maybe that's a good option in classrooms. So setting those rules is very important because, like I said, students go to schools not to play with their smartphones, to mingle with their peers, to play with friends in playgrounds, have a good conversation, laugh, you know, and interact with the teachers, not with their smartphones, because once they, you know, graduate into the real world, they'll have plenty of time, or plenty of screen time ahead of them. So I think restricting is one of the good options for students in classrooms.
And what are your thoughts on this, Hale?
Yeah, I think the key is also finding a balance. These new legal guidelines will now set the framework, but at the same time, it's also important for schools, teachers, and parents also to work together to help students develop healthy digital habits. And the goal isn't to simply forbid smartphone use, but how to teach how to use them responsibly. In that case, in that sense, clear rules can help create an environment where students can enjoy the benefits of technology without it taking over their daily lives.
So we've explored both the challenges and opportunities that come with smartphone use in schools, from concerns about distraction and mental health to the potential benefits of technology for learning. And while opinions differ on the best way to regulate phones, one thing is clear: finding a balanced approach that supports students' focus, safety, and growth is key. And as schools, parents, and students continue to navigate this issue, we hope conversations like the one we had today can help contribute towards creating a healthy, productive learning environment. And this brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation, but News Gen will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time. A big thanks to Kyiv.
Thanks for having me.
And also Hale.
Always my pleasure.
And to all our viewers, thank you so much for watching. And we are News Generation.
Feeling overwhelmed by a busy life without knowing where you are heading.
Realizing your mind has gone completely blank.
If you need
some time and space,
stay, escaping from a hectic life and waiting for your heart.
Temple, a place